I never thought that handing a soda to my grandson would end with me fighting for my life in the freezing water. One moment I was standing on the dock, the sun glinting off the lake, my hand outstretched with his favorite orange soda. The next, I felt two sharp, deliberate hands shove me square in the back. The air left my lungs in a scream that never escaped. The water was so cold it felt like knives slicing into my skin. My head went under. I thrashed, my arms flailing wildly, but the heavy sweatshirt I'd worn dragged me down. Panic clawed at my throat as I fought to reach the surface, to get even one desperate breath. When I broke through, coughing and sputtering, the sound that greeted me wasn't concern. It wasn't an apology. It was laughter. "Don't be so dramatic, Grandma." Jason's voice floated down from the dock, light and careless, as though he'd just told a joke. I gasped, choking on lake water. "Jason!" I croaked, but he was already pulling out his phone, scrolling, not even looking at me. 2 minutes. 2 minutes I fought for my life in that water, lungs screaming, body shaking from the cold. By the time I finally grabbed the slimy ladder and hauled myself onto the dock, my fingers were stiff, my hair dripping into my eyes, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. I sat there on the rough wood, soaked and shivering, staring at him. He didn't even glance up. "It was a joke," he muttered as he scrolled, thumbs flying across the screen. "God, you're so sensitive." Something inside me cracked then. Not with anger. Not yet. It was something quieter, deeper. A part of me broke that I didn't even know was fragile. And though I didn't know it yet, that crack was the beginning of everything. 2 weeks later, Jason's university fund would be gone. The dock was rough beneath my palms as I pulled myself up, water streaming off me in heavy rivulets. My sweatshirt clung to my skin like a sodden weight, and my hair plastered itself across my face. My chest burned from the cold, from the water I'd swallowed, from the sheer effort of not drowning. Jason didn't even glance at me. He sat cross-legged on the dock, thumbs flying over his phone, his head bent at a slight angle like he was the only person in the world. "It was a joke," he muttered when he finally noticed my shadow looming over him. His tone wasn't apologetic. It wasn't even embarrassed. It was annoyed. "God, Grandma, don't look at me like that. You're fine." I couldn't speak. My lips were too cold. My fingers curled into fists to stop them from trembling. But it wasn't just the lake water that made me shake. Something deeper ran through me, something hot and cold at the same time. I could have drowned, I managed to whisper, my voice breaking mid-sentence. Jason snorted. "You're being dramatic. You were like 5 feet from the ladder. Stop acting like I murdered you or something." And then he rolled his eyes. I stared at him, the boy I used to rock to sleep in my arms, the boy I taught to tie his shoes and sound out words. My sweet Jason, with a gap-toothed smile. But there was no sweetness left. All I saw now was a teenager scrolling on TikTok, smirking like he'd done me a favor by not filming the whole thing and posting it online. "Where's your mom?" I asked finally, my voice hoarse. He didn't look up. "Inside. Probably drinking wine and doing her nails or whatever." "Why?" I didn't answer. My feet felt heavy as I turned and walked toward the cabin. Every step left a wet trail across the deck, like proof that I'd been there, that I'd survived something I wasn't supposed to survive. Inside, the cabin was warm, the kitchen smelling faintly of coffee and lemon dish soap. I grabbed a towel from the rack and began drying myself off in silence. No one asked me what had happened. No one noticed I was drenched. In the reflection of the kitchen window, I caught sight of myself. Hair stringy, sweater clinging to my thin frame, eyes wide and rimmed red. I looked old, older than I'd ever allowed myself to feel. I thought about all the times I'd paid for Jason's summer camps, his new sneakers, his guitar lessons he never stuck with. I thought about the emergency loan I'd given my son and daughter-in-law last year when their credit cards maxed out. I thought about every Sunday dinner I'd cooked for them, every Christmas gift I'd bought, every late-night call I'd answered. Was I just convenient? Was I just the maid, the babysitter, the checkbook? I heard Jason laugh from outside. Not a joyful laugh, a mocking one, sharp and hollow. Something in me broke then. A crack, so small no one else could hear it, but I felt it deep in my chest. And I knew as I stood there in that warm kitchen with my wet socks dripping onto the floorboards that nothing would ever be the same again. A week later, I noticed how little respect they had for me, leaving dishes, mocking my habits. I remembered all the times I bailed them out. Was I just their servant? The house was quiet except for the tick of the clock on the wall. I sat in my living room, a mug of tea growing cold between my hands, staring at nothing in particular. The television flickered softly, but I wasn't watching. I couldn't stop thinking about that afternoon on the dock. The shove, the water, the laughter. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt those hands on my back again. Sharp, deliberate, not playful, not accidental. It wasn't just Jason's laugh that haunted me. It was the look on his face afterward, the way he shrugged like I was being a nuisance for not thinking it was funny. It was a joke. A joke. That's what they all said these days when their barbs landed too deep. The door slammed upstairs. My daughter-in-law's voice floated down, sharp and nasal. "Mom, you left dishes in the sink again. Could you maybe wash them instead of letting them pile up?" "Thanks." Her tone made my chest tighten. "Thanks." Like I was the hired help. I set my tea down and walked into the kitchen. Sure enough, there was a stack of plates. Forks crusted with leftover spaghetti, a greasy pan still slick with oil. I hadn't eaten dinner with them last night. I hadn't even been home. But here it all was, waiting for me anyway. Because that's what I was to them now, wasn't I? The cleaner, the babysitter, the silent wallet they dipped into when things got tight. I ran the water, watching the suds foam up around my hands. My reflection in the kitchen window caught my eye again. I didn't recognize her. This tired woman with the sagging shoulders and the thin, lined face. What happened to the version of me who built a whole life from scratch? I used to run my own business. I used to negotiate contracts, manage employees, balance accounts down to the penny. Now my days revolved around waiting for them to need me. And when they didn't need me, I was invisible. "Grandma, can you stop putting my clothes in the dryer? You're shrinking them." Jason's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. He stood in the doorway, his phone in hand, thumbs moving fast as usual. "Sorry," I murmured automatically. "Yeah, well, just don't touch my stuff, okay? God, old people and their weird habits." He walked away before I could reply. Weird habits. That's how they saw me now. An obstacle. A burden. I shut off the water and wiped my hands on the towel, my chest tight. I thought about all the times over the years I'd bailed them out. The time I covered their mortgage when my son lost his job. The time I bought Jason a brand new laptop because he needed it for school. The vacations I never took so I could make sure they had everything they wanted. And for what? So I could stand here now, treated like an unpaid maid in a house I wasn't even sure I was welcome in. Was this my fault? Had I taught them to see me like this? The thought hit me so hard I had to sit down. Had my love become so wrapped up in giving that they'd forgotten I existed beyond what I could do for them? A notification dinged on my phone. A reminder. Jason University Fund. Statement available. I clicked it without thinking. As the numbers loaded on the screen, my breath caught. That account. I was still the primary holder. My name was first. Something sharp and hot rose up in my chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something more dangerous. A spark. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a flicker of control. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as they thought. I called my old friend Doris for advice. "Don't let them treat you like that, May. You've given enough." Her words echoed as I began researching my legal options. Doris answered on the third ring. "May? Oh my goodness, is that really you? I was just thinking about calling you yesterday." Her voice had that same warm, familiar lilt. It almost made me cry. "Hi, Doris. Sorry it's been a while. I needed to hear a friendly voice." I sat in the corner booth of the coffee shop, hands wrapped tight around a paper cup of lukewarm tea. The air smelled of espresso and pastries, but I couldn't taste anything anymore. "What's wrong?" she asked, her tone instantly sharper. Doris had always been the type to cut through small talk when it mattered. "It's Jason and his parents." I told her everything. The shove into the lake, his laughter, the way they treated me at the cabin, like furniture they didn't notice until it got in the way. When I mentioned the dishes left for me to clean and the mocking jokes about my old lady habits, her silence on the other end was deafening. "May," Doris said finally, "you've given them everything, haven't you?" "I suppose so," I murmured. "No, not suppose. You have." Her voice was hard now, not unkind, but steady in a way mine wasn't. "All these years, you've bent over backwards for that family, covered for them, loaned them money, raised that boy like your own, and this is how they repay you?" My throat tightened. "They're young. Maybe they don't realize." "Stop." The single word hit me like a slap. "May, listen to me. You've got to stop making excuses for them. This isn't about youth or ignorance. It's about respect, and they have none for you." I said nothing. The barista called someone's order in the background, a cheerful voice. It felt like it was coming from another universe. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, May?" Doris continued. I almost didn't want to know. I see a woman who has worked her whole life, who raised her kids, who bailed them out every time they stumbled. You've given them your time, your money, your love, and somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing you as a person. You're a convenience now, a resource. Her words settled in my chest like stones. "You've given enough," she said softly. "It's time to think about you." For a moment, I felt heat rise behind my eyes. "I don't even know how anymore," I whispered. "That's okay. You'll figure it out. But the first step? Stop letting them take from you." When I hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Her voice still echoed in my head. "You've given enough." I didn't want to believe it, but deep down I knew she was right. I pulled out my laptop and stared at the glowing screen for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keys, shaking slightly. Then I started typing. How to change account holders on a joint savings account. Can a primary account holder remove a beneficiary? Legal options for elderly financial protection. Each search result felt like a crack of thunder. I wasn't ready to act, not yet. But something was shifting inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking for ways to help them. I was looking for ways to protect myself. When I hung up the phone with Doris, I sat there for a long time. The quiet of my living room felt heavier than usual. Her words echoed in my head like a drum beat. "You've given enough. It's time to think about you." I didn't know if I was ready for that, but I knew I had to start somewhere. That same afternoon, I found myself driving across town to a small financial advisor's office, the kind of place with muted carpet and soft piano music playing faintly in the background. A young receptionist with perfect hair greeted me. "Mrs. Landry? Kevin will see you now." Kevin, that was his name, the man behind the polished oak desk. His suit was crisp, his smile polite, but distant, like he'd had this conversation 100 times before. "Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing to a leather chair. I sat down, slowly clutching my purse in my lap. "My grandson has a university fund," I began. My voice sounded small, even to me. "We set it up years ago. I'm not sure where I stand with it anymore." Kevin nodded, clicking something on his computer. "Do you have the account number?" I handed him a folded slip of paper I dug out of my purse before I left home. "Let's take a look." The sound of his typing filled the room. My heart thudded harder with every click of his keyboard. Finally, he turned the screen slightly so I could see. "Yes, your name is listed as the primary account holder." My breath caught. "And my grandson?" I asked. "Beneficiary, which means he only inherits if if you're no longer here. Until then, you're in complete control. You can deposit, withdraw, even close the account entirely. You don't need anyone's permission." I gripped the edge of my chair. "You're saying I can do whatever I want with it?" "Yes, ma'am. It's your account, legally and fully." A strange feeling bloomed in my chest. Relief, power, something I hadn't felt in years. Kevin leaned back slightly. "Mrs. Landry, if you don't mind me asking, why are you looking into this now?" I hesitated, my voice soft. "Because I think I've been taken for granted for too long." He nodded knowingly. Maybe he'd heard stories like mine before, maybe not. But his eyes didn't show pity. They showed understanding. "Thank you for your time," I said quietly as I rose to leave. "Any time," Kevin replied. "And if you decide to make changes, just call us. We'll help you handle it discreetly." That evening, I sat on the edge of my bed back home. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Jason's latest post. It was a grinning selfie with the caption, "College life coming soon! Can't wait to use Grandma's gift." My jaw tightened. Maybe he thought that money was already his, but for the first time in a long time, I smiled. "Not so fast, Jason." 2 days later, I sat at my dining room table in the dim glow of the desk lamp. The house was still. No laughter, no footsteps upstairs, no clinking dishes in the sink waiting for me. Just silence. In front of me, my laptop hummed faintly. The bank's login page stared back like a doorway I wasn't sure I should step through. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Once I did this, there was no going back. But then I heard Jason's voice in my head again, his mocking laugh as I gasped for air in the lake. "Don't be so dramatic, Grandma." My jaw tightened. I typed in my password. The screen loaded. The university fund account appeared, the numbers glowing bold and clear. For years, I had watched that account grow like a proud gardener tending a plant. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time I got a consulting bonus, I added to it. This was supposed to be my grandson's future. But what about mine? I clicked transfer funds. A little window popped up asking me to confirm. "Are you sure you want to move $136,842.76? I stared at the number. Years of sacrifice. Years of believing that if I gave enough, they'd love me back. "Yes." I whispered to no one, and I clicked confirm. The loading circle spun for what felt like forever. Then it was done. The account balance dropped to 0. The money now sat safely in my retirement savings account. Mine. I closed the laptop softly, as if shutting it too hard would undo everything. For a long moment, I sat there in the dark kitchen, listening to the clock tick. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I felt tired. Later that night, lying in bed, I opened my phone and scrolled through Jason's Instagram. There he was, grinning in yet another selfie. "College life coming soon." Thanks, Grandma, for believing in me. The caption hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at it until my eyes burned. Did I feel guilty? Maybe, but only a little. After all, he hadn't believed in me, not enough to respect me, to value me beyond what I could give. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the helpless, invisible woman they thought I was. I felt steady, and that steadiness terrified me. The next morning, as I poured my coffee, my phone buzzed. It was my daughter-in-law. A text. "Hey, May, can we talk later? Jason's working on his college housing paperwork." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. She didn't know yet, but she would, soon. And when she did, the storm would come. I took a long sip of coffee and set the mug down. Let them come. It happened sooner than I expected. 2 days later, I was in the kitchen peeling apples for a pie when I heard tires screeching in the driveway. Then came the sound of a car door slamming. Heavy footsteps pounded up the porch steps. Before I could even set the knife down, the front door burst open. "Did you touch Jason's university fund?" It was my daughter-in-law, her face flushed, her hair pulled back tight like she hadn't slept. She didn't wait for an answer. "You emptied it, didn't you?" she demanded, voice cracking under the weight of her fury. Behind her, Jason stood in the doorway. His arms were crossed, his face pale and tight. I hadn't seen him look this serious in years. My heart thudded, but I didn't move. "I asked you a question, May," my daughter-in-law barked. "What gives you the right?" I wiped my hands on a dish towel, moving slowly, deliberately. "I'm the account holder," I said quietly. "That gives me the right." Her mouth fell open. "You're joking. This is his college fund, his future." Jason shifted uncomfortably behind her. "Grandma, why would you do that?" There it was, that same tone, not curiosity, accusation. I'd heard it so many times over the years. dressed up as guilt trips and half-hearted concern. "I set that money aside for you," I said evenly. "I can choose to move it back or not." My daughter-in-law's voice rose to a shriek. "You're punishing him because of one mistake. He's just a kid." My hand tightened around the edge of the counter. "A kid?" I said softly. "He's 18, old enough to push his grandmother into a freezing lake and laugh about it." Jason's face flushed deep red. "It was a joke," he mumbled. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I took a slow breath, my chest tight. "No, Jason, you don't get to decide that anymore." The three of us stood there in the kitchen, the air thick and sharp like a brewing storm. I could see it on her face, the calculations spinning in her head. This wasn't about Jason's future. It was about control. And for the first time, they realized they didn't have it anymore. "May, you can't do this," my daughter-in-law said finally, her voice low, almost trembling. "Yes," I said quietly, "I can." They stared at me like I'd grown horns. I set the towel down gently on the counter. "I think it's time you both left. May, out." There was a long, tense pause. Finally, she spun on her heel and stormed out the door. Jason lingered for half a second longer, his eyes darting between me and the floor. Then he followed her, the screen door slamming shut behind them. The sound of their car tires squealing out of the driveway was deafening in the stillness that followed. I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, my hands shaking. For years I'd imagined what it might feel like to stand up to them. But I never thought it would feel like this. Not triumphant, not victorious, just quiet. My phone buzzed on the table, a new text from my daughter-in-law. "You'll regret this." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Then I set the phone down and folded my hands in my lap. No, I thought. For the first time in my life, I won't. The house was silent after they left. No angry voices, no slamming doors, no tires squealing in the driveway, just quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the grain of the wood as if it held answers. The clock on the wall ticked loud in the stillness. Tick, tick, tick. I had lived my whole life putting others first. My husband, my son, my grandson. What did I have to show for it now? A wet towel still draped over the counter from when I dried my hands. An empty house that didn't feel like mine anymore. And the sharp echo of my daughter-in-law's words still ringing in my ears. "You'll regret this." Would I? I didn't think so. But then why did my chest feel so tight, like something heavy was sitting there? I pressed my palms together and tried to steady my breath. I thought about Jason's face as he stood in the doorway, the embarrassment, the anger. But not once did I see regret. Not for the shove, not for the words that followed. "Don't be so dramatic, Grandma." The memory made my throat tighten. Was I dramatic for expecting a little respect? Or had I just allowed myself to become invisible over the years, too afraid of being alone to ever say no? The tea in front of me had gone cold, but I didn't care. I wasn't ready to move. A noise outside broke my thoughts, a car driving by. I almost expected it to be them, coming back for round 2. But the car passed without slowing. Of course it did. They weren't coming back for me. They never had. I thought back over all the little moments in the past few years. The unreturned calls. The holidays where they showed up late, distracted, gifts still in the shopping bag. The way my daughter-in-law once said, "You're so useful to have around," as if I were a coffee maker or a vacuum cleaner. Useful, that's all I'd been to them for years. A wallet, a babysitter, a maid. And the truth hit me like a punch to the ribs. I had let it happen. The clock ticked on. The sun shifted through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the floor. It felt like something was ending, but not in a bad way, more like a chapter closing. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because the part of me that used to beg for their approval felt quiet now, almost peaceful. My phone buzzed on the table. A voicemail this time. Jason's voice, sharp and trembling. "Grandma, you've ruined everything. I hope you're happy." I didn't listen to the rest. I deleted it. For years, I would have called him back immediately, apologized, begged for forgiveness, offered to fix everything. Not this time. This time, I sat in the quiet. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. The room felt different now. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was calm. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. This was only the calm before the storm. And I was ready for it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the only sound in the house. My daughter-in-law's words replayed over and over. "You'll regret this." Maybe she thought I'd beg for forgiveness. Maybe she thought I'd grovel like I always had. But she didn't know. I was done. The next morning, I made a decision. I sat at my small wooden desk and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on the search bar like it was daring me to take the first step. One-way train ticket to Oregon. The results popped up instantly. Departure at dawn. Arrival at my niece Clara's house the next evening. I remembered her voice months ago when she called. "May, you don't have to stay there if it's not good for you. You can always come here." I hadn't listened then, but I was listening now. I clicked book ticket. My credit card number felt strange under my fingers, like I was finally spending on myself instead of everyone else. Booking confirmed. There it was, a single line of text that felt like freedom. I spent the afternoon packing. Not everything, just enough. I pulled out a battered suitcase from the back of my closet. One by one, I folded sweaters, blouses, and jeans with mechanical precision. I added my favorite cardigan, the one with the tiny pearl buttons my husband once said made me look like a classic movie star. Photographs came next. Not all of them. Only the ones that mattered. My wedding photo, a picture of me holding baby Jason before everything turned sour, and a snapshot of Clara and me laughing on her porch years ago. I left behind the family portraits they'd staged for social media. Those weren't memories. Those were performances. I moved slowly, carefully, as if the walls themselves might notice what I was doing and alert them. Each item I placed in the suitcase felt like cutting another thread, tying me to this house. By the time the sun set, the bag sat zipped by the door. I glanced around the bedroom one last time. It looked strange. Emptier, but not sad. For years, this room had felt like a waiting room. Now it felt like a place I was finally ready to leave behind. That evening, I scrolled through Jason's social media again. He was grinning in a new video, waving his acceptance letter in front of the camera. "College life starts soon, can't wait to live it up." My stomach twisted, but this time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt nothing. As the house grew darker, I grabbed a notepad from the kitchen drawer. I wrote a single line. "The keys are on the counter. Goodbye." No explanation. No apology. Just that. I placed the note carefully on the kitchen table beside the house keys. In the stillness, I heard my own voice whisper, "This is it." And for the first time in decades, I believed it. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. The stars shimmered faintly above the driveway as I loaded my suitcase into the trunk. The engine started with a low hum. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. By this time tomorrow, I'd be gone, and they'd finally understand what it meant to lose me. The next morning, I woke before the alarm, 3:58 a.m. The house was pitch dark, silent except for the faint creak of the heater kicking on. I slipped out of bed and moved quietly, my slippers making no sound on the floorboards. My suitcase waited by the door, packed and ready. This time, I wasn't hesitating. I picked it up and stepped outside. The air was sharp and cold. A thin layer of mist hung over the driveway. I paused for a moment, letting the chill seep into my lungs. The house loomed behind me, dark and still. For years it had felt like a place I was trying to prove I belonged in. Now it was just wood, glass, and memories I no longer needed. I set the suitcase in the trunk and closed it gently. No sound, no witnesses. Before I got in the car, I turned back once. The kitchen light was still on from the night before, casting a faint yellow glow across the porch. On the table inside, my note sat folded neatly next to the house keys. "The keys are on the counter. Goodbye." No love, Mom. No see you soon. Just goodbye. It was all they deserved. The engine hummed softly as I started the car. For a split second, my hand hovered over the radio dial out of habit, but I didn't turn it on. The sound of tires crunching over gravel was enough. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of the house in the rearview mirror. The mist curled around it like a ghost. I didn't feel sadness. Not anymore. I felt light, lighter than I had in years. The sun was just starting to rise as I hit the open road. Pale pink streaks bled into the gray morning sky, the kind of quiet beauty I used to miss while cleaning up after everyone else. I rolled down the window slightly and let the cold air sting my cheeks. I wasn't running away. Not this time. This was something else entirely. I was choosing myself. The phone buzzed in the passenger seat. I didn't pick it up. Not when it buzzed once. Not when it buzzed again. Not when the screen lit up with my daughter-in-law's name. They could leave as many voicemails as they wanted. This time, I wouldn't be listening. At the edge of town, I passed the old diner, where I used to take Jason for pancakes on Saturday mornings. I didn't look inside. Some memories were too heavy to carry where I was going. The road stretched out endlessly ahead of me. Oregon was still hundreds of miles away, but for the first time in decades, I felt like I was already home. They would wake up soon, they'd see the note. They'd realize the keys were gone, and when they did, they'd finally understand. I wasn't theirs to push around anymore. The train hummed softly beneath me as it cut through pine-covered hills. I sat by the window, watching the world blur past, endless streaks of green and gray. It felt strange to be moving forward for once. Not for them, not for Jason, not for anyone else, just for me. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Again, I didn't move. The first call had come hours ago, just as the train pulled out of the station. It was my son's number. I let it ring. Then came my daughter-in-law. Then Jason. Voicemail after voicemail piling up like snow in a storm. The phone buzzed again, longer this time. I pulled it out and stared at the screen. 12 missed calls. 7 voicemails. I swiped the notifications away without listening. The train rocked gently, the sound of metal wheels on tracks soothing in a way I hadn't felt in years. The last time I'd taken a train, I was 24, heading home after visiting my sick mother. Back then, I'd spent the whole ride thinking about what I could do for her. Now, decades later, I was thinking about what I could finally do for myself. The phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. This time, I pressed play. My daughter-in-law's voice crackled through the speaker, sharp and venomous. "May, how could you do this? You're selfish. Jason's future is ruined because of you." Ruined. There was a muffled sound, like she'd pulled the phone away for a moment. Then she came back, her voice lower. "You're going to regret this." I deleted the message. No hesitation. No second thoughts. The train slowed slightly as it approached a small station. A group of college students stood on the platform laughing, backpacks slung over their shoulders. One of them reminded me of Jason, but then I remembered his voice, cold and dismissive. "Don't be so dramatic, Grandma." A part of me still wanted to cry for him, but I didn't, not this time. I closed my eyes and let the rhythmic sway of the train steady me. They were angry now, but it wasn't anger born out of love or worry. It was anger born out of losing control. For years, I'd given them everything. My money, my time, my energy. And now that I was finally keeping something for myself, they couldn't stand it. Another call came in. This time, it was Jason. I didn't answer. His voice filled my voicemail a few minutes later. "Grandma, please call me back. Please. I didn't mean to upset you." There was a long pause before he added, softer, "Just don't do anything you'll regret." I stared at the phone. Would the old me have called back right away? Would I have apologized for hurting them, even after they'd nearly broken me? Of course I would have. But that May was gone now. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass of the train window. The forest blurred past in a wash of green and gold as the sun began to set. The phone buzzed one more time. This time, I turned it off completely, and as the screen went black, I felt a small, quiet smile creep across my face. Let them scream into the void for once. This ride wasn't about them. It was about me, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going back. The train pulled into a small station for a transfer stop. I stepped off and found a quiet bench near the edge of the platform. The air smelled like pine and faint cigarette smoke from a man pacing nearby. I set my bag on the bench and stared down the tracks. I should have felt anxious, alone, but all I felt was stillness. The phone in my pocket vibrated again. This time, I pulled it out. Jason's name flashed across the screen. It buzzed once, twice, 3 times. I almost let it go to voicemail like all the others. But then something inside me shifted. I swiped to answer. "Grandma?" His voice cracked on the first syllable. It caught me off guard, sounding younger, smaller than I remembered. "Grandma, please." Silence. I said nothing. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I didn't mean to hurt you. It was just a joke. I didn't think—" His words tumbled over each other like stones rolling downhill. "I didn't think you'd take it this far. I swear I wasn't trying to." He stopped suddenly. I heard him exhale. "You've always been there for me. You've always helped us. Please, don't leave like this." For a split second, I felt my chest tighten. This was Jason. The boy I used to push on the swings until my arms ached. The boy who once held my hand at the grocery store because he was scared of getting lost. But as I listened, I realized something. His voice didn't sound like a grandson desperate to make amends. It sounded like a boy desperate to get back what he'd lost. His future, his comfort, his college fund. "I'll be better," he whispered. It was almost convincing. Almost. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't about love. It was about control. And I wasn't giving it back. The train whistle blew in the distance. I tightened my grip on the phone. Jason's voice cracked again. "Grandma, say something. Please." My lips parted slightly, but no words came. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't need to say it anymore. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. "Fine," he muttered finally, his voice hardening. "If that's how you want it." The line went dead. I set the phone down on the bench beside me. The whistle sounded again. I watched the train round the corner, its lights glowing like twin eyes cutting through the fog. This wasn't about revenge. It never was. This was about saving myself. As the train screeched to a stop, I grabbed my bag and stood. I didn't look back, not at the bench, not at the station, not at the past. The doors slid open with a hiss. I stepped inside, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. By the time the train reached Oregon, the sky was the color of wet ash. Clara was waiting for me at the station. She spotted me before I saw her, waving both arms like she was trying to guide in a lost plane. "Aunt May," she called, her voice warm, alive. For a moment, I thought I might fall apart right there on the platform. But I didn't. I smiled, held my head high, and let her pull me into a hug. "You're here now," she whispered. "You're safe." Her house smelled like fresh coffee and laundry detergent. A small 2-bedroom with creaky floorboards and mismatched curtains, but it felt more like home than anywhere I'd been in years. She led me down a narrow hallway to a little guest room at the back. "The bathroom's just across the hall," she said gently. "Fresh towels are on the bed. Unpack if you feel like it, or don't. Rest first." I nodded. "Thank you, Clara. Anything for you." She hesitated in the doorway. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. She didn't press, just smiled faintly and pulled the door shut behind her. The room was quiet except for the faint sound of rain against the window. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my suitcase on the floor. It felt strange to see it there, still packed, still zipped, as though I hadn't really arrived yet. I took off my cardigan, folded it neatly, and set it on the nightstand. Then I sat back down and stared at my hands. They didn't look like my hands anymore. The veins stood out in sharp blue lines, the skin thin and spotted. These were the hands that had cradled Jason as a baby, the hands that signed every check, cleaned every dish, wiped away every tear. Not mine, but theirs. What did I get for it? A shove into the lake, a laugh, and a voicemail calling me selfish. The tears came suddenly, spilling hot and fast down my cheeks. I pressed my fists to my mouth, trying to stifle the sound. Not for them. I wasn't crying for Jason. I wasn't crying for my son. I wasn't even crying for the years I'd lost. I was crying for me. For the woman I used to be. For the woman I'd buried under years of yes and don't worry about me. For the years I spent believing that love meant giving until there was nothing left. The sobs came harder now, shaking my shoulders, pulling everything out of me. Grief, anger, regret. But beneath it all, a strange new feeling was beginning to bloom. Resolve. When the tears finally stopped, I sat there in the dim light, staring at my reflection in the little oval mirror above the dresser. My eyes were red, my face blotchy. But for the first time in years, I didn't see weakness. I saw a woman who'd survived. I whispered aloud to the empty room, "Never again. Never again would I let them use me. Never again would I beg for scraps of affection. Never again would I trade my dignity for their comfort. They'd taken enough. No more." The rain had stopped. The silence felt different now, less like loneliness, more like peace. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and let my body sink into the mattress. Tomorrow, I'd start fresh. But tonight, I let myself rest. The next morning, I walked to the little library in town. It was small and quiet, the kind of place where you could hear the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I chose a corner computer station near the window. As I sat down, I felt the weight of my old life pressing against my shoulders. When the screen flickered on, the first thing I saw was my email inbox. 12 new messages. But one stood out instantly. From Kayla's subject, "You abandoned us." I clicked it. The words jumped off the screen like darts. "May, I can't believe what you've done. You left us. You left Jason. You've destroyed his future and broken this family. We trusted you. We depended on you. And now Jason's dreams are dead because of you. You're selfish, bitter, and cruel. We'll never forgive you for this." I stared at the message, my hand gripping the mouse so tightly it hurt. For years I would have cried, reading something like this. I would have believed every word. But not anymore. This wasn't love. This wasn't concern. This was rage over losing control. I placed my hands on the keyboard, and for the first time in my life, I didn't hesitate. Subject, you abandoned us. Kayla, Jason didn't lose his future. He lost my trust when he pushed me into a freezing lake and laughed while I fought to breathe. Actions have consequences. You've treated me like a convenience for years, a wallet, a babysitter, a maid, and when I finally said, "Enough," you called me selfish. Let me make this clear. I owe you nothing. This isn't revenge, this is survival. May, I read it back once. It was short, sharp, final. Then I hit send. The cursor blinked in the empty reply box. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel fear. I felt clean, like I'd just stepped out of a long, suffocating fog and finally breathed fresh air. The librarian walked past, humming softly as she reshelved a stack of books. I watched her for a moment, marveling at how small and quiet her world seemed compared to the storm I'd just walked out of. But it wasn't my storm anymore. I'd left it behind. When I stepped out of the library, the sun hit my face. I tilted my head back and closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth sink in. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Jason. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear whatever came next. As I walked down the sidewalk, I realized something strange. For the first time in decades, my shoulders didn't feel heavy, and that terrified me, because it meant I was really free. But freedom comes with a cost, and I had a feeling they weren't done trying to collect. 2 weeks later, I sat in a small-town cafe, nursing a cup of tea. The room was warm and smelled faintly of cinnamon and fresh bread. Clara had gone to run errands, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the quiet hum of conversation around me. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to be useful to anyone, and it felt strange. Not bad, not yet good, just new. At the next table over, 2 women chatted in low voices. I heard Jason Landry dropped out of college, one said. Really? The other replied, eyes wide. I thought his grandmother set him up for life, the first woman snorted. Guess not. He's working at that hardware store on Main now. Good for him, the second woman said. Better than sitting around. They moved on to another topic, but the words hung in the air like a quiet bell. Jason dropped out. Jason is working. I stared down at my tea, my hands wrapped around the warm ceramic mug. It wasn't the future I had imagined for him, but maybe it was the future he needed. My phone buzzed in my bag. I didn't check it, whatever it was. An apology, another accusation, or silence. I didn't need it anymore. I'd already written the final chapter in my mind. Later that evening, Clara and I sat on her porch as the sun slipped behind the hills. The air was warm, the sky streaked with pink and gold. Clara handed me a glass of lemonade. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. I thought about her question for a long moment. Did I regret pulling the money? Did I regret walking away? Did I regret leaving them with nothing but themselves? I shook my head slowly. No, I said. For the first time in my life, I don't regret a thing. The screen door creaked behind us as a soft breeze brushed across my face. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. I wasn't the same woman who stood shivering on the dock that day, gasping for breath as my grandson laughed. That version of me had drowned in that lake. The woman sitting here now, calm, steady, unafraid, had pulled herself out. Clara reached over and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "You're stronger than you think, Aunt May." I smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe I just finally remembered who I was before they made me forget. We sat in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for once, I wasn't afraid of finding out, because I wasn't living for them anymore. I was living for me, and that was enough. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment with the city you're tuning in from, and your thoughts about the story. I'd love to see how far this story reaches, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more daily stories.